Shalom, my name is Joseph Shulam, and I've been teaching on the book of 1 Samuel already 18 lessons, and we're in chapter 18 of 1 Samuel. We're starting chapter 19 and lesson 19. I want to go back a little bit to the end of chapter 18. King Saul is still with full intention to murder David. He sees David as usurper of the throne. He sees David as a threat to his dynasty, the first king of Israel. He has a son, Jonathan. Jonathan is slated to be the next king. David and Jonathan, very close friends, maybe more than that. The text doesn't make things clear, but there's all kinds of innuendos in the text itself. And King Saul decides that finally the evil spirit of God is motivating him to have David dead. But he can't do it. He can't do it for several reasons. First of all, David is very, very smart, sneaky, cunning, brave, motivated. He is absolutely sure that the authority of Samuel, given to Samuel by God to anoint David as king and to end Saul's dynasty, is from God, and it's his, and he's got to claim it and take it. So the king, Saul, is insecure from the very beginning of the story, and he is intent to either neutralize David by killing him or by other ways. And one of the ways that King Saul devises is to give David his daughter Michal, his younger daughter Michal, as a wife, something that had actually been promised before David killed the Philistine giant Goliath. So now he says, okay, I will tell David, I don't want any dowry. I don't want anything from you. What I want you to bring me as dowry, bring me the foreskins, the circumcision skins of 100 Philistines as vengeance over the enemies of the king. And Saul puts this task on David because he thinks that David can't do it, that he will get killed by the Philistines in the process. The servants of David tell him what Saul said, that he can marry King Saul's daughter. And verse 27 of chapter 18 says, and David gets up and he goes with his men and he kills 200, not 100, 200 Philistines. And he must have had a sharp knife, circumcises them, brings the foreskins of 200 Philistines to King Saul in order to marry King Saul's daughter Michal and make her his wife. And Saul sees the 200 foreskins. I don't know if they came in a box, in a bag. I don't have any, I can't imagine the sight of David's men bringing the 200 foreskins to Saul. But Saul realizes from this one act in which he hoped to make David fall that God is with David. And he knew that Michal, his younger daughter, was also in love with David. And verse 29 says, and Saul, King Saul, continued to fear from David more. And Saul became an enemy of David all the days. And the leaders of the Philistines leave. What do I mean leave? They leave the borders of Israel on the Shephelah, on the low hill country, west of Jerusalem, southwest of Jerusalem, and they realize that when they leave David from all the servants of Saul, his name will be very, very honored, precious. Now I finally got to chapter 19, verse 1. Saul talks to Jonathan, his son, and to his servants to kill David. Jonathan, the son of Saul, likes David. So Jonathan tells David, my father Saul wants to kill you. Protect yourself and hide in the morning. And you should hide and stay safe. And I will go and I will stand next to my father in the field, probably the training field, military training field. And you'll be there, and I will be speaking to my father loudly, and let's see what he will say. They didn't have listening devices or cell phones or other ways, so David hides in a place near the field within a distance that he can hear Jonathan speak to his father. Verse 4 of chapter 19, and Jonathan speaks about David, good things about David, to Saul his father. And he says, let the king not sin on his servant David, because he didn't sin against you. And everything that David has done up to now has been good. It's been good, he's been successful in doing the right thing. And he endangered his life when he killed the Philistine giant. And God gave him the ability to make a great salvation for all of Israel. And you saw it, and you rejoiced with David. Why should you sin with clean blood to kill David for nothing? That was the words of Jonathan to his father Saul in the field where David is hiding, and he's hearing this conversation. Saul hears Jonathan and takes an oath in the name of God, I will not kill David. Verse 7, Jonathan calls David and tells him all the things that he had spoken to his father, and that David can return in a relationship with King Saul like it was in the past, a good relationship. And the wars continued. And David continued to go out and fight the Philistines and strike them a big strike, a big hit, and they run away from David. Verse 8. Verse 9, the evil spirit of God entered Saul again in his house, and he is sitting there with his spear in his hand, and the shield of David in his hand. He's holding a spear in one hand and then the shield of David in his hand. That's where the word Magen David, shield of David, comes here, from verse 9 of chapter 19. It became the symbol of Israel, the symbol of the Jewish people, but that was quite late. That was only about 350, 375 years ago. Before that, it was just a symbol. And Muslims used it, and Christians used it, and there is a church in Rome that the whole motif of the church, built in 475 AD, is the Star of David. So, the evil spirit of God enters Saul again, and he is holding his spear in his hand and the shield of David in his hand, and he wants to kill David again. And David is there in the palace. He returned to the palace. Jonathan told him, my father swore before God that he's not going to kill you. So he returned to the palace. And Saul trusts the spear and David, and the spear hits the wall, and David runs away that night. And Saul sends messengers to the house of David to catch him and to kill him. And Michal, the daughter of King Saul, tells him, my father is sending soldiers to kill you. And she lets David go down from the window, out of the window, and run. And Michal takes the household idols. Very interesting text. This one verse reveals to us a world that we can't imagine. Can't imagine because, we don't understand as Jews, modern Jews, and as modern believers, evangelicals, we don't understand the issue of syncretism. Syncretism means that you have two cultures, two religions, that are synchronized together. They look like one, but they are synchronized together. The truth is, modern Judaism is synchronized with Zoroastrian ideas, pagan ideas. Christianity is synchronized with all kinds of pagan ideas. The culture is oftentimes stronger than the theology or than the purity of ideas and biblical concepts. And it was so not only from the days of King Saul. We find that in the house of Laban, the brother of Rebecca, the wife of Isaac, or the father, mixed up a little bit, of Rebecca. No, Laban is the father of Leah and Rachel, the brother of Rebecca. He had idols. Jacob in his house, he had idols. Remember, Leah and Rachel took the idols from Laban's house with them on the way back to the land of Canaan. Then Laban chases Jacob, catches up with him before he crosses the Jordan, and says, "Why have you taken my idols?" Rachel is sitting on them and says, I'm in a monthly period, I can't get up. But finally they discovered the idol that was stolen. Why would she take them? The rabbis, of course, they try to protect Saint Rachel. They said, well, she didn't want her brother and her brother's house to worship idols, so she took them with her. Okay, it's a nice attempt to protect her name, her reputation, but very unlikely. More likely that they too had household idols. In the archaeological digs in Jerusalem, even in the houses of the richest people in Jerusalem, maybe the house of the high priest or the house of the Hashmonite descendants from Second Temple period, the Val Museum in the Jewish Quarter, you see what they found there in the house of the priests. Household idols. We read the prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Joel, Hosea, Amos, all the prophets. What are they prophesying? They're prophesying against idolatry within the house of Israel. So here Michal takes the household idols that she had, she was David's wife, and sets them up. They must have been pretty big. Sets them up in the bed, takes a goat hair, goat skin, puts as like the head of David and covers him with the idols, and clothes the idols. And when the messengers, the soldiers of King Saul come to take David, she says, he's sick in bed, leave him alone. And Saul's messengers, his soldiers, come to see David. They wanted to take him with the bed, sick, to King Saul in order to kill him. And they come in, and what do they find? The household idols. And the fur of the goat as his hair, as his... Must have been a red goat, gingy goat. And Saul tells Michal, David's wife, his daughter, what have you done? Why have you cheated me? Why have you released my enemy and allowed him to run away? Michal answers her father Saul and says, he told me, let me go, I'll kill you. Because she's lying. She was the one that initiated David's escape and encouraged it and made it possible. But to protect herself in front of her father, the King Saul, she tells her father, he threatened to kill me, that's why I let him go. And David runs away. And messengers come to Samuel. And David comes to Samuel, to Ramah, and tells him all that has happened to him and all that King Saul wanted to do to him. And David and Samuel are in Nayot, not far from Ramah and not far from where I live. And message comes to King Saul, says, David is in Nayot in Ramah. and Saul sends messengers to take David. And sees the band of prophets. And Samuel is orchestrating them in front of him. And the messenger of Saul, the Spirit of God, comes upon them, and they begin to prophesy. Remember, these are popular prophets. They have music, dancing, they have, ecstatic phenomena, almost like a good Pentecostal charismatic church today. Okay, so the messenger of King Saul get caught up into this prophesying, and they come back to Saul and said, this is what happened. He sends other messengers, and they also start prophesying. And Saul continues sending a third group of soldiers to catch David. They also start prophesying. In other words, King Samuel, the old man, is orchestrating some kind of religious, prophetic